As a nurse, I had grown accustomed to moments of vulnerability, pain, and raw emotion. But nothing could have prepared me for the man on the gurney that stormy night. He was barely conscious, his body battered and bruised from a motorcycle accident, and yet, through the haze of painkillers and exhaustion, his piercing green eyes locked on mine. "Don't let me die," he whispered, gripping my wrist with surprising strength. There was something about his voice, soft but resolute, that sent a ripple of unease through me, as if he already knew me better than I knew myself. I should have brushed it off as the ramblings of a scared, injured man, but that moment planted a seed of something I couldn't explain. By the time the night was over, he would do something so unexpected that it would upend my life in ways I never thought possible. The rain was relentless, hammering against the hospital windows like 1,000 tiny fists. Inside the trauma ward, the air buzzed with urgency. I stood by the bedside of the man from earlier, monitoring his vitals as he drifted in and out of consciousness. His name was Ryan, a detail I'd overheard from the paramedics. He'd been lucky or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it. A car had sideswiped him on a dark highway, sending his motorcycle skidding into a ditch. He'd survived, but just barely. "BP is stable," I muttered, more to myself than to anyone else. Ryan's hand twitched, and his eyes fluttered open. "Nurse," his voice was hoarse, a mix of pain and exhaustion. "What's your name?" I hesitated. Rule number 1, don't get too personal with patients. But something about the raw vulnerability in his expression made me answer. "It's Emily." A faint smile curved his lips. "Emily, you've got a kind voice." I felt a flush creep up my neck, but I brushed it off, focusing instead on adjusting his fore. "You should rest," I said, keeping my tone professional. "I'll rest when I know I'll wake up," he murmured. "Promise me I will." "Don't say things like that," I replied firmly. "You're going to be fine. Just follow the doctor's instructions." Ryan chuckled weakly. "Doctors didn't save me out there. You did." His words caught me off guard, but I didn't have time to respond. A crash of thunder echoed outside, and the lights flickered. The ward seemed to hold its breath for a moment before the power stabilized. My heart raced, though I wasn't sure if it was from the storm or Ryan's unsettling intensity. Over the next few days, Ryan's recovery became my unofficial responsibility. Other nurses commented on how quickly he seemed to improve when I was around, joking that I had some kind of magical healing touch. I laughed it off, but deep down, I couldn't deny that I felt a strange connection to him. His injuries were severe, but his determination to heal was fierce, and he always seemed to save his best efforts for me. One night, during my rounds, I found him sitting up in bed, his face illuminated by the dim light of the bedside lamp. "Emily," he said as I entered. "Can we talk?" "You should be resting," I replied, crossing my arms. "I know, but I need to say this." He paused, his gaze piercing. "I don't know what it is about you, but you've been more than just a nurse to me. You've been my anchor." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. "Ryan, I'm just doing my job." "No," he said firmly. "It's more than that. You've been in my head since the moment I woke up. I don't even know you, but I feel like I do." His words sent a jolt through me. I should have shut him down, reminded him of the professional boundaries we were crossing. But instead, I found myself sitting down beside him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Ryan, you don't know what you're saying. You've been through a trauma. It's normal to feel a bond with the person who's been taking care of you." He shook his head. "It's not just that. Tell me you don't feel it too, Emily." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Because the truth was, I did feel something, a pull, a spark, something I couldn't explain. But admitting it would mean opening a door I wasn't sure I was ready to walk through. Before I could respond, the ward's intercom crackled to life, announcing a code blue in another wing. The spell was broken, and I jumped to my feet. "I have to go," I said quickly, avoiding his gaze. As I hurried down the hall, My mind raced. This was wrong. Whatever connection I felt with Ryan, I had to bury it. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more I realized I was already in too deep. The next day, I avoided his room altogether, assigning his care to another nurse. But it didn't matter. When I passed by his door, I felt his eyes on me, like a silent plea. I couldn't ignore the magnetic pull between us, even as guilt gnawed at me. That evening, as my shift ended, I found a note tucked into my locker. It was from Ryan. "Meet me by the garden entrance tonight. There's something you need to know." My hands trembled as I read the note. This wasn't just a crush or an infatuation anymore. It was something far more complicated, and I had no idea where it would lead. But as much as I wanted to walk away, I couldn't shake the feeling that meeting him was the only choice I had. Little did I know, that decision would unravel secrets and betrayals I never saw coming. That night, the rain had stopped, but the chill in the air lingered as I made my way to the garden entrance. Shadows danced under the faint glow of the hospital's outdoor lights, and my heart pounded with every step. I questioned myself repeatedly. Why was I here? Why couldn't I just ignore him, chalk this up to a patient's misplaced gratitude, and let it go? But something inside me, something I couldn't name, had drawn me here. Ryan was already waiting, leaning against the railing of the small, secluded garden path. His face was pale but resolute, a mixture of relief and apprehension when he saw me approach. "You came," he said softly, pushing off the railing and standing as tall as his healing injuries allowed. "I shouldn't have," I replied, crossing my arms defensively. "Ryan, whatever this is, it's not." "Please, Emily, just listen," he interrupted, his voice low but urgent. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I haven't been honest about." I froze. The look in his eyes told me this wasn't just another declaration of gratitude or admiration. This was something deeper, something that would change everything. "What are you talking about?" I asked cautiously. He took a step closer, his gaze steady. "The accident, it wasn't just an accident." "What do you mean?" Ryan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "The car that hit me, it wasn't some random driver. It was intentional. Someone wanted me dead." The words hit me like a punch to the gut.
"What?"
"Why would someone want to kill you?" His jaw tightened. "Because I know something I'm not supposed to. Something dangerous. And now I've dragged you into it." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Ryan, you're not making any sense. What could you possibly know that's worth killing over?" He hesitated, glancing around as if checking for eavesdroppers. "I can't tell you everything. It's too dangerous. But I'm a whistleblower, Emily. I worked for a company that's been hiding something huge, something illegal. When I tried to expose it, they came after me." My breath caught. "And the accident?" "They tried to make it look like one," he said bitterly. But I saw the driver's face before I blacked out. He wasn't some random stranger. He was hired. I shook my head, struggling to process his words. "Why didn't you tell the police? Or the doctors? Someone who could protect you." He laughed bitterly. "You think I haven't tried? They have people everywhere, Emily. I can't trust anyone except you." The weight of his confession settled over me, heavy and suffocating. This wasn't just about a patient with misplaced feelings anymore. This was something far more dangerous, far more real. "Ryan, I don't know what you expect me to do," I stammered. "I don't expect anything," he said, his voice softening. "But I needed you to know the truth. You've been the one person I could count on through all of this, and if something happens to me," he trailed off, his eyes dark with unspoken fears. I opened my mouth to argue, to tell him this wasn't my problem, that he needed to leave me out of it. But before I could speak, the faint sound of footsteps echoed behind me. I turned sharply, my pulse spiking. A man in a dark coat stepped into the light, his face partially obscured by the brim of a hat. "Ryan," he said calmly, his voice low and menacing. "You've been hard to track down." Ryan stiffened, instinctively stepping in front of me. "Emily, get inside."
Now.
"No," I whispered, fear rooting me to the spot. "I'm not leaving you." The man took another step closer, his hand sliding into his coat. "You should have stayed quiet, Ryan. Now it's too late for both of you." Time seemed to slow as adrenaline surged through me. Ryan lunged forward, grabbing a nearby bench as a makeshift weapon. "Run, Emily," he shouted. But I couldn't move. The man reached for something. Was it a gun? A knife? And I panicked, my mind racing for a solution. Without thinking, I grabbed the emergency alarm on the wall and yanked it hard. The shrill sound pierced the air, startling the man and drawing attention from the nearby hospital staff. "Damn it," the man hissed, backing away into the shadows. "This isn't over." Within moments, security guards rushed into the garden, and the man disappeared into the night. I collapsed onto the bench, my legs shaking, as Ryan sank down beside me, his hand clutching his side. "Are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling. He nodded, though his face was pale. "You saved me, Emily." Again. I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "What the hell have you gotten me into, Ryan?" "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice heavy with regret. "I never wanted you to be a part of this. But now we have to figure out what to do next. Together." And just like that, my life as a nurse, a life of healing, order, and simplicity was gone. I was in too deep, tangled in a web of danger, lies, and a connection to Ryan that I couldn't deny, no matter how much I wanted to. The next few days felt like a surreal blur. Ryan was moved to a private room under tighter security, though the hospital administration chalked it up to precautionary measures after the garden incident. No one knew the truth except us. I spent my shifts oscillating between dread and determination, wondering if I'd made a mistake by staying involved, and yet, every time I saw Ryan's face, I knew I couldn't turn my back on him. Late one night, long after most of the staff had gone home, I found myself sitting by his bedside again. Ryan's bruises had started to fade, and his strength was returning, but there was still a tension in his eyes, a guardedness that hadn't been there before. He had pulled me into his world, but he was still holding part of it back. "We can't keep going like this," I said finally, breaking the silence. "If someone wants you dead, hiding in a hospital isn't going to stop them. What's your plan, Ryan? What happens next?" He looked at me, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about that," he said slowly. "There's someone I can go to, someone who can help me get this evidence to the right people. But it means I'll have to leave." Leave. The word felt heavier than it should have. "Where will you go?" "I can't tell you," he admitted. "It's safer that way. For both of us." A knot formed in my chest.
"So, what?
"You're just going to disappear?" After everything that's happened, after everything I trailed off, unable to say the words aloud. Ryan leaned forward, wincing slightly as he moved. "Emily, you don't understand. If I stay, you're in danger. They know who you are now. They saw you with me." "I don't care about the danger," I said fiercely. "I care about you." The confession hung in the air between us, raw and undeniable. Ryan reached for my hand, his touch warm and steady despite the storm raging around us. "I care about you too," he said softly. "That's why I have to go. If I stay, I'll only put you in more danger. You've already done more for me than anyone ever has. But this is something I have to finish on my own." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "And what am I supposed to do? Just go back to my life like none of this ever happened? Like you never happened?" Ryan's grip on my hand tightened. "You don't have to forget me. I'll never forget you. But you have a life here, Emily, a good life. Don't let me ruin that for you." I wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but deep down, I knew he was right. His world was one of shadows and secrets, and I didn't belong in it. I had spent my life mending broken people, not running from danger. As much as I wanted to hold on to him, I knew I had to let him go. "When will you leave?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper.
Tomorrow, he said.
Someone will come for me in the early hours. I'll be gone before the sun comes up. The finality of his words hit me like a blow, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. But then he pulled me into his arms, holding me close as if trying to memorize the feel of me. Thank you, Emily, he murmured into my hair. For everything. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, neither of us willing to break the fragile bubble of time we'd created. But eventually, the reality of the situation caught up with us. I had a shift to finish, and Ryan had a fight to prepare for. The next morning, I arrived at his room just as the sun was rising, only to find it empty. The bed was neatly made, the monitor silent. He was gone. On the nightstand, I found a single folded note with my name on it. Asterisk Emily. You saved me in more ways than one. I'll never forget your kindness, your strength, or the way you looked at me when I felt like the world was against me. You gave me hope when I had none. I don't know what the future holds, but if I make it out of this alive, I'll find you. I promise. Until then, stay safe. Be happy. And don't ever forget how much you mean to me. Ryan, asterisk. I pressed the note to my chest, letting the tears finally fall. I didn't know if I'd ever see him again, but I knew one thing for sure. Ryan had changed me. He had shown me a world beyond the walls of the hospital, a world full of risk and heartbreak, but also one full of love and courage. As I walked out of his empty room, I made a silent promise to myself. No matter what came next, I would live boldly. Because if Ryan could face his demons, then so could I. And somewhere out there, I hoped he was doing the same.